Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Untethering Shame podcast. If you're a returning listener, welcome back. I so appreciate your support. And if you're new to the podcast, welcome to the team, where our job is to dive deep into the heart of shame to understand just how much it affects us and what we can do to dismantle its hold. Today, I'm beyond excited to welcome Kay Battaglia, passionate mom, volunteer, advocate, friend, and executive director for the state office in Wisconsin for the National Alliance on Mental Illness. Kay is a fierce presence, willing to go to the mat for what and who she believes in, and helps give space and a voice to the people around her who need it most. And mental health is at the forefront of her work. With several family members who have and continue to struggle with mental illness and the impact that that's had on hers and their lives, she wants to change the conversation on mental health. She wants less parents, kids, partners, siblings, and friends to struggle alone. She wants people directly and indirectly affected by mental illness to have access to support, information, and recovery. And she's not willing to be silent or complicit in her endeavors. Kay and I worked together at NAMI, Wisconsin for several years and bonded over that personal and professional commitment to our work and process in the field of mental health. And after years of knowing and supporting each other, I'm honored to be here in this space with her to dive even deeper into the personal journeys and professional pursuits when it comes to mental health. So get comfy, take a deep breath, and know regardless of what you are living with and how you feel you're handling it, you belong here and we see you. Kay, welcome. I'm so excited that you're here.
Great to see you, Kira. It's been a while since we've connected. This is wonderful to be able to connect with you on, a topic that's close to my heart.
It's interesting because as much as I'm excited and our overlap and our commitment to mental health, one of the things that I thought about recently, do you remember years ago when my power went out at my apartment and I ended up having to come to your house and you had to help me, you got ice, you helped take me around places.
I do remember that because I drive by those apartments and I always think about, wonder where you are, how are you doing?
Well, it's just that moment and being in your house and just being with you that day and what do you need? I got you. I'll pick you up. I'll do this. That immediate sort of hands-on, I'm all in. It's not convenient. I think something happened either the same time or it was a different thing where I was having a car issue. There was a lot happening and you were just never faltering. If you need something, I have the ability to be there for you. So let me. And that was that's how I've experienced you from the beginning, is this if I can, I'm assuming you've had to work really hard to know when you can and when you can't. But if I have the resources and I want to give you those resources, let me give them to you. That is something that's important. Has that always been a thing for you?
I think I've always been the mothering type, the person in a friend setting. I'm going to be the organizer. I'm going to bring the snacks. I'm going to schedule the plan. And also, just kind of that lean in person. We always talk about, when you're in a room and somebody falls on the floor, there's people that lean in and run over and go, oh, can I help you? And there's those people that sit and go, uh-oh, what happened? And I've always been kind of that lean in personality. I think a lot of people in my family are that way. And I married somebody that's that way. So I think it's just kind of who I am. And it's hard to think about not being that kind of a person. And I always wonder about people that they're the ones that sit. What are they thinking? I don't want to get involved, and I don't know, it's just kind of that helper thing. But of course, yeah, I love being there, fulfilling a need for people, helping people. That's kind of what led me to this job, I believe.
Well, and I'm curious because two things. One, I'm curious about how you got it, how mental health became kind of one of the focal areas, but also before we even get there, as a fellow giver, and I think I'm learning, and we were talking a little bit before we started recording about becoming a mom and the invitation that's given me to kind of reframe what giving and showing up looks like. How do you manage that? Because I've never, and again, I know I see you from the outside, but knowing what you do at NAMI, knowing everything that you've done in your family, that you continue to do, that love you give, how do you keep the threshold so you don't burn out? Because that feels like when you are that person that leans in, it feels like at the end of the journey is burnout and resentment for the people that haven't leaned in, and that particularly like when is it your turn to be the one on the floor where others are leaning in for you? How do you manage that?
I wish I could say I do it really well. But you know, the funny thing is one of my coping skills is to do more. So when my personal life is kind of difficult, I actually gather great pleasure out of helping other people, diving in deeper. It kind of is a positive coping skill in a way. I think my husband doesn't think it's a positive coping skill. I think he thinks I worked way too many hours. But it gives me, I mean, you can reflect on what you've done. I think it is hard. I think I have to consciously think about, okay, I'm now going to leave my computer at the office and not take it home, in remote work world now, like
Mhm.
when you worked at NAMI office, we all had those big tower computers. You couldn't really take your
Yeah.
computer home with you, right? And so now in this world, we all have laptops. We take our laptops everywhere. It's
Yep.
on our phones and everything. So it's really hard to divide that. Um, and I've had to make some tough choices on things that I used to do and volunteer in and be involved in. I finally had to say, I can't do all of these things anymore. I did my hours and hours of volunteer time. And NAMI's a little bit of a volunteer job, right?
Mhm.
Some of the pay is not so great. So I did have to I did have to give up some of the volunteer things that I'd done for years, just to make that balance because I was burning out. And I actually didn't enjoy those things anymore. Like I resented them. It was like,
Yeah.
oh, I've got to do this now. And so as much as I loved doing those, you do have to make choices. And it doesn't mean you don't care about something, but you do have to make choices in life of where you're going to spend your time. And, my family is kind of my priority. And then my job. And then you make those balanced choices and it is hard. It's funny, you were talking earlier before we got on air, and I just want to give you a visual. And it's funny, you
Mhm.
talked about Costco. When my husband and I lived in Dallas, and then we moved to Alaska. And I, at the time, was working in clinical research and doing lots of clinical studies um, and really loved my job. But we decided to make this move. And for about a month, I stayed at home with my firstborn son, and he was just an adorable little kid. And I remember going to, I think it was Sam's, though. We didn't have a Costco. We went into Sam's, and Austin, my first son, he wanted to play with something. And we were in the store, and it was harmless. And I was like, no, we have to hurry up. I need to get the shopping done, and I need to do this, and I need to do that. And then I stopped and I went, well, I don't have to. Like, he's enjoying this. And I remember just sitting on the floor and letting him fiddle with whatever it was and just going, I can do this. I can breathe for a while and just enjoy him and
Mhm.
let him experience this. I don't have to rush. That's self imposed. That rush sometimes is all
Mhm.
self imposed. And I just remember that scene of me going, I'm leaving, I'm not going to be working for a while because I was also pregnant with my second child and I chose to take some time off from paid work. And it was just like me learning how to enjoy my kids and not rush and rush and rush. And
Mhm.
I just still have that visual of that moment of me acknowledging that it was okay to take that time.
Yeah. It's such a weird thing, and I wonder if that's part of where that balance for you comes in, because I think busyness and what we do is our dominant form of social capital in this world. And even when we're doing things like nonprofit work and trying to make a change, there's still this like hustle, and it's ingrained in us. And I think you and I have very similar coping mechanisms to just go do more when we're feeling
Yeah.
like things are falling apart. Because if I can achieve it over here, or at least like do something over here, I don't feel like everything is coming out. And it's that invitation. I noticed it the other day with Everly, where I kept using the word late. We're late to nap time. We're late to bedtime. And sometimes sometimes you got to be at school and like you made a commitment to be there by a certain time. Like, yes, we're late. But sometimes like we are technically late because like I'm done momming for the day and it's past 8 o'clock. Like I need you in bed.
Right.
But I was starting to use this and I'm like, what am I subconsciously telling her? Like why I need to be okay that whatever time it is right now, it's whatever time it is. And I can either be kind of rushing us through to get her into bed. And maybe it's like the person that speeds past you only to get stuck at the stoplight right next to you. Like maybe I'll save 10 seconds, but what am I losing? And I think that's a lot of, and I remember this with you. I remember these moments, like even when there'd be a lot of frenzy and I think a lot of early 20 somethings that were at work. And I think you had the beauty of like that separation because you saw, gosh, it's just not that serious. And there would be times where I would be almost panicked about something and you would remind me of that. And I'm curious because you can hold that. You've held it, like you said, just being with your kid. And it wasn't natural. It was instinctual. You felt it, but you had to train yourself to do it. And now you work in a job where your whole focus is people struggling with mental health. This is personal and professional for you. And no matter what you do, you aren't going to reach an endpoint because this isn't going anywhere. Unfortunately, there's no resolution. There's no anything. You are in this every day, regardless of what hat or role you're on. How do you not get lost in that like push to constantly be doing more? Like, how do you stay present in that when it feels like the fight is so big? Again, both at home with loved ones and in the office.
Well, there's days where, I feel like it's a treadmill and I keep repeating the same thing and nothing ever changes. And honestly, what helps sometimes, actually, a lot of times, like right now, I'm speaking to you from a conference where we work with law enforcement where they can learn more about mental health and how to respond to people. And when I come to these things where I'm working with people in the field and they tell me how some training we've done with them has made a huge difference in their lives or a huge difference in their job, or when we've done trainings with people that are taking a class of family to family, which is a NAMI family program, and people come to you and tell you how that program changed their lives, changed their family's ability to function and communicate with the people they love. It just motivates me more. I realize that you're just having that. It might still be a macro impact, but you're still having an impact on everyone's vision. And there were several bizarre silver linings of the pandemic, but the one that really comes to my mind is how much more normalized it is now to have this conversation about mental health. We have people now, huge corporations in Wisconsin reaching out to us, asking us for support and also just conversations with their employees because they know that their employees are burning out. And that didn't happen before. And several of those conversations I've had, I've done like a webinar, a presentation, and the CEO of the company's come on the webinar to announce that they themselves struggle. And that impact it has on all those employees to normalize that is huge. And I've had that happen like 2 or 3 times, shockingly, wasn't expecting it. And it really makes a huge difference in how I keep going, because like you reach those times when you're going to, am I making any difference? Am I making any difference? And when you have those experiences that rejuvenate you and get you excited about what you're doing, I think that's really helpful for me.
Yeah.
But I also, there's definitely times where I am tired, and I think about, man, this is kind of an imposterous thing. I'm sitting here telling you this and things aren't going so great at home, right? Or there's times people call and ask for support, and the story they're telling me, I just sit there and go, I have no idea what to tell this person to do to get the help they need, because there's so few resources or options or whatever for that person. And that breaks my heart because, there should be options and there should be support for those people. But, um, I think for every time I have one of those conversations, I have another conversation where somebody's really, had a positive impact. So I think you just have to find also using humor.
Mhm.
I use humor a lot. My office uses humor a lot. They know humor's a lot of what we do, and take those breaks at work.
Mhm.
My staff really demands that we have garden days and that we, go for a walk at lunch, and they're pretty demanding on getting their mental health needs met as well. So I think it's also in my culture at the office, right?
Yeah.
It's not true in all offices that you have that culture of being aware of how your mental health is, just a part of your overall well-being. And it's
Yeah.
so much what we repeat it all day long, right?
Right.
When I worked in Houston, I worked in the cardiology department, and guess what those people did? They went for a jog every day and they ate vegetables every day. So,
Right.
I was in the best shape and looked the thinnest I ever looked when I worked in the cardiology department. So there is kind of that culture in the element of where you work.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because I think as you were talking, I thought about sort of sometimes it feels like a binary, but I think it's really a spectrum of kind of helpful to helpless. And it's really hard when we're talking about something where we can feel so helpless. And I struggle with that personally. I'm a therapist. My job is to help people. Why can't I get my mom to do the things that she needs to do to deal with her anxiety? Or like, why can't I get her to see these things and make these changes? But I'm being paid to speak at these big corporations, or I have these clients doing this stuff. Like, again, that imposter feeling, and you feel helpless. Or why can't I be the parent that can make my 3-year-old not have these tantrums? We use words. She came in one day and told me, again, she's going to be 3.5. And we had people over, and it was people that Jordan works with, they're residents, and he's the attending overseeing health and design at the department. And he had residents coming over to talk about it. And she went outside, she comes in, she goes, Mom, I feel anxious because there are people at my house I don't know, which like that came from us talking about it. But then the next day she had a flippin' temper tantrum because she didn't have a fruit pouch right afterwards. And I wasn't off the phone and she was expecting to see me and she couldn't handle it. And you're like, I should be able to fix this. I should be able to make it better. So there's helpless, or those phone calls, like you said, I've had that with clients where I'm like, I don't think I'm helping you. And you feel it. But those other moments where you go, I can be helpful. And you get sort of the humility and the reminder that it's not my job to do it all for everyone. My job is to just keep showing up and be a part of it. I'm curious for you though, because you went, your story is not unique in the sense that a lot of people, particularly I think moms, make the choice to, and people can't see that you did it, but you put, quotes under paid labor, because being a mom, being a caregiver for anyone that has done that, for anybody is really hard. And you had, 1 going on 2 and then eventually 3 in your household that you're, raising. So you spent a significant amount of time having all these other roles and things that were important to you, but really that was kind of primary. And then you came back into the workforce, that's where we met each other. What was that like for you? And did you carry shame about that? Or did you feel like, because you'd been, connected to NAMI because John was connected to NAMI and you were a part of that. And again, you wasn't like that was new to you. You had seen mental health struggles in your family. You had accessed support in different ways. But did you feel like I'm not going to be good enough, or I can't be here with people and do this work, like people are going to think less of me?
I think before I applied, I did. I think there was all this anxiety of, wait, I haven't done this. And also, you have to realize that the world of work had changed. It had gone from very little technology. I mean, when I worked doing research, there was a computer, but it was a huge computer, and
Yeah.
the software was much different, and like that scared me more than anything. This huge change of technology, and oh my gosh, I'm going to be so far behind. But
Mm,
I'll be honest with you. During those years that I was mothering, I was just a freaking rock star volunteer, I got to tell you. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I was organizing huge events, 500 kids at the high school, their senior dance, and, you know, volunteering at this huge swim meet that we have in Madison. And I was doing a lot of professional stuff. And I remember as I would do it, the professionals that were still working and volunteering would be saying, "Can I hire you? You know, because you
Mm-hmm.
did this really well." So I didn't lack confidence on my ability to do things. It was just more scary that, it was going to be a different world of doing that. But I think when I came in and interviewed, um, I was scared. And then when that first week, I was definitely scared. Am I going to be good enough? Can
Mm-hmm.
I do this? But then once I saw, that I could and it was going to be okay, and also, the team was very supportive. I just kind of grabbed it and went with it. And but you do have to have that confidence. And I will say, if I hadn't continued to work really hard in the doing volunteer stuff and stayed connected with all of the things that were going on, I
Mm-hmm.
probably would have been more intimidated. So I do value people that volunteer. I think it's a lost thing. I think very few, it used to be an art in that there were so many at-home moms, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a kind of gone by the wayside, um, on that volunteer front. And now we're going to have such a huge population of older people, right? With this wave,
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping that that becomes the thing to fill that void. But yeah, it's a change. I think I felt more guilty when I was not working,
Mm.
because you couldn't have, like, you'd get those snide remarks of, "Well, you've got a lot of time to do this volunteering," like it was a bad thing.
Ah.
But I was doing that and I was helping their kid or their community in some way. So, to insult me because I had time to volunteer and drive your kid here, do this for your kid,
Yeah.
that kind of pissed me off. I mean, quite frankly, it's like, yeah, I have the time and I'm willing to do it. So don't insult me for it.
Well, and like, it's not, I have the time because I can't do anything else. It's, I made a choice in line with my values and how I want to be. And why do you have any right to comment on how I do that? And
Right.
I think that is, it's such a projection for people. And I think it's like, well, I have to feel better about the time I don't have by making it that the only reason that you're so good at that must be because you have time. And I think that is such a natural kind of like fight response for us is I'm going to make you feel small so I feel okay. And you've seen that. You saw that in the mom world, you saw that in the volunteer world, probably less so within the NAMI community, just having been there. Like it happens, but it's less of like my ego superseding yours. But there's always that bit of that. There's always that judgment. And I guess a big part of it, which it's interesting because when you came on, I think technically I was your supervisor, but I was
Yeah.
like, I am learning so like I felt like we were just equals. And I sincerely hope that's how it felt because it's like we're just all doing a job. Like the like org charts don't make any sense to me other than like it's helpful to know who's the person you can ask for help or like lean on. But you had such a knowing and a confidence. And I remember really wanting to root into that. And I think I connected to the fact that you weren't shy about talking about your own family's struggles with mental health. You never did it in a way where you were telling their stories or like making it, it was never salacious. It was just, I get it. And I remember having you to talk through those things with, or just to normalize, I got into this, most of us find our way into mental health for our own experiences, direct or indirect. And so I just remember feeling like you had a lot of wisdom in I realized I couldn't be the hero in the whole world, but I could be a hero in my world that I show up in and create. And that means putting my ego at the door. That means being willing to be silently sort of like helping and supporting. And you would do that in these micro ways. And my guess is because one of the things we see within, supporting someone with mental health issues is a lot of times what we do is going to be rejected, pushed back on, not seen. We're doing the best we can to show up for our own loved ones. And so you have to kind of be okay with that and be okay with and I guess that's momhood too. There's a lot of the stuff I do where it's like Everly's never going to know that she's had the life she's had because I spend all this time calculating these things behind the scenes or organizing things the way they are. But I know, and I know that I'm trying to help her. Did you ever struggle with that? Like a lot of what you did and what you continue to do as a mom, as a partner, as a friend, in all these ways you show up, it's never fully going to be seen or appreciated. Is that ever hard for you?
No. And I'll just be honest with that. I do a lot of things, and I mean, I have my husband go, I don't know why you're spending hours doing X, Y, or Z. And
Mhm.
if you don't have internal like respect and love for what you're doing, then don't do it. Like you shouldn't do things to get credit for it or acknowledgement for it. It should really be within you because you want to do it. And like I have a hard time, I will sort of brag, but it brings my point. I just received an award um, from NAMI, and I was embarrassed by it because I never do these things for the acknowledgement of it. I mean,
Mhm.
I want to do it to help other people, but I also, there's no doubt that either volunteering or working through NAMI, I gain
Yeah.
internally from it. And that's why I do it. I resent it only in that if other people take credit for it and they didn't do anything,
Mhm.
then there's a space there for me to resent that. But I just, I like being the quiet worker bee. I want to lead, but I also kind of like the quiet worker bee and moving forward that way.
I really admire that in you because I think that's something that is hard for many
It
of
is,
us.
yeah.
It's like, I mean, I try to practice it all the time of I don't need Jordan to acknowledge everything I did at the house to validate. I used to do even this thing, and that was me not feeling secure in myself. Like he's going to think less of me because I didn't, do X in my business or make this much money or do this around the house. And it would be he'd come home and that was really hard during the pandemic because obviously we had a newborn and then all my work went virtual. And so I was like never leaving the house. So he'd come home and if there was a mess everywhere, something was happening, I would be recapping everything I did in the day. And he didn't say it in this way, but it's basically like to sum it up was like, you don't need me to give you a gold star. And also you don't owe anybody an explanation for how you spend your time. And I think for us, a lot of times we get stuck in that. One, I have to be constantly doing enough to prove that I'm worth it. And that's that, like, I got to do more, be more. But then it's met with, and I need everybody to see it because otherwise I'm afraid that I'm not going to be acknowledged to be in the room. And that I think is, you have something inside of you that my guess is you've had to cultivate it. There are times it's probably harder than others, but you don't get pulled as much in that way. I think like a lot of people do.
I will say my parents probably had some part of this, but the part that I've always had a strong sense of self-worth. And my mother used to always say this saying, you're no better than anyone else, but other people aren't any better than you. And she would just
Mm.
repeat that. So that gave you a sense of don't be highfalutin, you're not
Mhm.
this amazing person, but no one's better than you either. It doesn't really matter who they are, what they are. Don't devalue yourself. And I think that sense of self, but I mean, that's not to say that I don't want to justify like if I don't get anything done on a weekend, that I'm not sitting there going, oh God, I didn't get anything done on this weekend. And then to have to acknowledge that I deserve to have a weekend where I don't do anything and that I'm a slob and that's
Mhm.
okay. But I definitely have that kind of guilt of, oh, if I wasn't productive, if I didn't get everything done that I had
Mhm.
intended to done, you definitely have that guilt. Um, and I know what you're saying is especially when you have young kids, it's almost like it doesn't matter what clean, it's going to be dirty 5 minutes later. And it
Yeah.
seems like, right. So why bother? Right. But then
Uh-huh.
you feel this need of, it's like a self-imposed need to make sure that you have everything in its order and everything's in its place. And, but I think maturity and getting through a lot of things in life. I mean, there's just no way. When I walked into NAMI, I was 50, had 3 kids, had moved several times. Things didn't upset me as much just because you lived through those experiences and you know it's going to be okay, you know. Whereas the first time somebody's going through all of those things, you just don't know. You don't have that plan. And so that anxiety of, am I doing it right, is always going to be there. Am I doing it right? Am I doing it the right way? And, as you probably know, studying, it's a 50-50 chance, kids are born with a package
Yep.
that you don't have any control over, even when they're 3.5, right?
Yep.
And you could have 2 3.5-year-old twins and do the same thing, and this one will choose to take this trait, and this one will choose to, or has that trait.
Yep.
So we as parents think we have so much more control and power than we actually do about what comes out of our kids. You just love them, and you just let them know you love them, and you provide food and water, and they're gonna, I'm not sure what we do, and as much as we stress about it, especially in this time of kind of professional parenting. My generation was definitely a part of that professional parenting, where you think you do have a CEO corporation viewpoint of raising children, and they're still gonna, come out the way they do because they're their own independent being,
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's been like the biggest life lesson in general is you can't control anybody else, whether that is, I love your mom's saying of like, we're all just people. We're all just trying to do the best that we can. Nobody is better or worse. I mean, early in mom days, I think especially because of the pandemic. And so I didn't have a lot to compare things to, but I didn't love being a mom to a baby. I don't love babies. Like that's a hard stage for a lot of people, but I 100% didn't love it. I was very confident I didn't ever want to do that part again. And so I felt a lot of shame about that. Like I should want to be around her, but also like she doesn't do anything. Like she's just kind of there and she doesn't sleep. And I felt like I spent all my time breastfeeding and I had committed to not watching TV while I was doing that because she would absorb something. So I was like, this just feels hard. I would compare myself then to other people. Like even I tried a couple virtual support groups. By the end of it, I was being their therapist. I was like taking over the group. And I recognized that was me finding a sense of superiority to feel a sense of okayness in my role as a mom. Part of it, I'm sure, is my nature to want to help people, but a part of it was also ego protection. And so I think a lot of the times when we can't control that, I think particularly when we have our own, like, again, like what you said on the macro change versus micro change, like I can do these big things. I just wrapped up a 5-session series at a big company and we talked about self-love and like the work that was coming out of that for people when we were addressing burnout and shame and really getting to the root of that. And then I'm having a conversation with my mom who I can't even like have a full conversation with without being angry or irritated or like doing this because she just won't do the work she needs to do to get her mental health in check, like that whole thing. And then you have to come back from that and be like, gosh, I can't control her. My only choice is to love her for who she is in this moment. And if I'm going to show up, I can't show up with kindness and love with the expectation that then she's going to be different because of that. I think I learned that as a mom, and now I'm applying that. And I'm sure I have many more lessons. Again, I was only 3.5, but that I think is a big thing of like that mom that I saw struggling that I was like, oh, see, I'm doing better. There are days that she's going to do way better than me. And the reality is, who cares if at the end of the day, we're both just showing up with love and kindness and with everybody else around us. And I think that is, you got to get to a place in that to be able to show up every day. And I think I would say envious, but I say it less like maybe I'm admiring it. Maybe it's something I want to aspire to. I think maybe that's more the word. Like I want to continue to work towards that because it's something I think that it's very clear to me you've worked really hard on and you have such a skill in that. What do you see as the next part? Like when you think about, okay, I'm still blending that. There's always, I mean, you're still a parent. Parenting is hard, even when they're old, like that's really tricky. And you've still got your own things. You've got the micro versus the macro. What's your next part of your process and work? How do you need to keep going to kind of release pressure, or to give yourself grace and space, or to just keep finding that flexibility so you can lean in without burning out or leaning into the shame in a way that's hurtful to you?
Well, I think for me, I'm kind of in those observing, um, probably I've got 2, 3 more years in this job.
Mhm.
Um, and I have adult children, and I have a mom who's 88. So there's also that trap of wanting to be there for your adult kids, wanting to be there for your job, and also wanting to spend time with my mom who lives in Texas while I live in Wisconsin.
Mhm.
And so when I think about what I'm going to be doing in the future and balancing all of that, wanting to lean in, take care of my own mental health and my family, I I think I just keep thinking about, I just want to spend more time with my mom. I want to spend more time being graceful to myself. Um, and it's funny. I read this book, or I saw the cover of the book. I didn't read it. Sorry, because I laughed at the cover of the book. It said, "Parenting adult children," and it made me laugh out loud
Yeah.
because you shouldn't be parenting your adult
Uh-huh.
children, right?
Uh-huh.
Like the fact that that's a topic, but I do know I'm still doing that,
Yeah.
and I need to stop.
Yeah.
I need to just, my dad was so great about when I would call and ask for advice or want to tell him a problem or something. He would never, it would piss me off because he'd never give me advice. He would always say, "Well, Mary Kay, what do you think you should do?" And he
Mm.
would always divert it back to me because he knew I knew the answer, right? And
Mhm.
if he gave me the answer, I might resent if it's the wrong answer, or, because you want to
Mhm.
please your parents. You always want to please your parents. And um, so I think I want to learn to not parent my adult children, and give up control over thinking I have any control. I want to spend more time with my mom because I, value that. And I want to leave this position in a couple of years, in a place where I can have pride and have succession so that the next person that takes it over can do as well as I did and even better. And so I think I envision my future of many things as kind of relinquishing control and being okay and satisfied with that.
I love that. And I think a lot about my mom. And I had a lot of trauma because she had undiagnosed bipolar disorder and then struggled with cocaine addiction when I was little. And so then when we tried to repair our relationship, she kind of came back in my early 20s, but it was still kind of rocky even then. And honestly, it's only been in the last few years we actually have, I think, a healthier relationship, like where I am learning to love her for who she is. And I think the work now is me, and also realizing that she's never going to tell me the things that I maybe was looking to hear about everything we went through. But she would come back in, and I think she'd have so much shame about her mental
Mhm,
health stuff and not being
mhm,
there. And she kept trying to parent me. So she'd come visit me at college and she'd like try to do my laundry and buy these things. I'm like, Mom, I don't need a mom. I don't mean this mean, but I've been parenting myself since I was 12. I just
mhm,
need you to be here.
mhm,
And part of that I'm sure was me pushing away out of protection, but I think there is this point where you have to change that over. And I mean, I have a lot of years before I'll reach that point with Everly, but I think the hardest part is from the moment we have them in our lives, at whatever point it clicks for us, when you're pregnant, once they're here, if you adopt, whatever that looks like, there's this responsibility that we have to show up for them and to always be there and to give them everything. And you just want to protect them from harm. Like I found out a kid today at school, like was angry about something and he like kind of pushed at Everly a little bit, and obviously not enough to like do anything. And she said, I just told him no. And then I told the teachers and they took me to have some space. And I was like, okay. But all I wanted to do was go, well, metaphorically, but also physically go punch that kid and be like, don't fucking touch my daughter. Because
Right.
you want to protect them. And so I think for you, it's learning how to release that and to trust that you and John and them as their own selves have done what they can to learn how to protect themselves. And there's going to be times they can't. And there's going to be times that they royally screw up or get it wrong, but to reserve the right that they can and to release the responsibility for you to prevent that from happening and instead be there. And I could imagine, because I'm just learning how to do it with my mom, because I think as a parentified child, I've confused our relationship a lot. And I don't know how to do that yet. And so I couldn't imagine with my actual child how hard that would be. And so for you, I think I want to celebrate you acknowledging that, because I think a lot of people listening to this are going to be on either side of that, of like, oh yeah, that is this change that has to happen at some point, and a lot of times we don't get there. And so that's hard. You are incredible. I would love to talk to you all day long. And I know that you have more to do with the training. I know that there's going to be a couple people that just heard training for law enforcement in the beginning that are going to want to learn more about that, particularly with sort of sensitivity around law enforcement, mental health.
Yes.
So I'm going to put so many links. I mean, this is the overlap of us both having been and still being in the NAMI sphere. I will put links to the crisis intervention training, all the other stuff that NAMI has. You mentioned the family to family program, and there's so many other programs people have. But I'm curious, in addition to me giving them all those resources, when you think about people listening, people who are in that position of like, I'm just trying to hold so much and do so much, and I feel like I can't solve it all. Is there any last words or invitations you want to leave people with before we close for today?
I think, of course, we see this in the NAMI world, that there are so many people out there that have moms like Kira's mom or my family members, and they're struggling with feeling like they're, the shame or the guilt or the inability to understand why their family member lives with a serious mental illness. And there's just so many people out there that are going through that same thing. And, we don't have control over people with serious mental illness. We have compassion, and we have the ability to love them and get them to resources and support, but we don't, you know, especially once they're adults, they have to want to get better. And I think that's one of the biggest struggles is watching a loved one struggle and them not wanting to get better. And I think I just want everybody to know there's a lot of people out there that know what you're going through and understand and can be empathic to that. And you're not, I know it's this silly saying that NAMI says all the time that you're not alone, but really, you're not alone. There's a lot of people that are dealing with what you're dealing with. And, finding what works for you is the most important thing. So if that's a support group, or if it's just a resource, or if it's a book, or if it's a podcast, or a series of podcasts, find what works for you. But, I think us taking care of ourselves is vitally important, because, it's that saying of if you're on an airplane, you don't put your mask on first, you can't really help anybody else. So be sure and find the things that help you so that you can be there for everybody else.
I love that. And I think it reminds me of something that one of my supervisors told me when I was in my master's program, which is, you can't be the hardest working person in the room. Your client has to be. And I think that's so true for our family members, our kids, our, friends, our parents, the people we work with. They have to be the hardest working person in their circle and for their life. And that's really, really hard, because we go, if they would just do this, they could feel better, be happier, suffer less. And you don't want to see it, but that is a choice they get to make. And that sucks. And so I think just knowing that and just recognizing maybe, and I ask myself that a lot in conversations with my mom now, like, am I working harder for her to make a change than she's working for herself? And
you saw the people in recovery and NAMI that became their biggest advocate. And think about
Yes.
the pride that those people feel because they have worked harder than anyone else for their own
Yes.
well-being. And like I'm a control freak. So me trying to fix somebody is
Uh-huh.
not helping them. Letting
Yeah.
that person help themselves and get to a place of recovery on their own gives them that confidence and pride that they can take care of themselves. But it's hard to watch because you're sitting there going, oh, I know what you should do, right?
Yeah.
You should do X, Y, and Z. But if they don't want to do it, they're not going to do it. And that's okay. But man, if they will do it, they'll own that pride and they'll own that recovery, and it's going to be their own. And so we, you know, maybe corralling them to that direction is helpful, but we can't do it for them.
I love that. And I think what you just put as key is it's giving them the space to be empowered and have pride in their own life and the work that they do instead of doing it for us or because they're forced to. I mean, we know that long term for mental health recovery, addiction recovery, and so much more. It has to be them. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, from one control freak to another, I think it's a journey we're sort of always on. It even just made me think about like whenever Lee's going to cut something and she doesn't quite know how to cut yet. And I want to be like, let me just do it. I don't have 6 hours to watch you cut this piece of paper. And then you go,
Yeah.
You just cut it however you want. And it doesn't look the way I would do it. And that's fine. And release it. And so I love this. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much for this conversation. Everybody that is listening, I sincerely hope that you can feel that warmth, that love, that commitment, and just that vulnerability that Mary Kay brings in these interactions. And if you haven't connected with NAMI before, there's a NAMI state organization in all of the states in the US. There's the national organization, there's local affiliates. There's so many different ways to connect. So I will make sure that all of that information is there for you. They have tons of free resources and programming and support and people that just want to help you feel that feeling that Mary Kay mentioned, which is that you aren't alone and it is okay that you are suffering, whether you are struggling yourself or someone else's. And people just want to connect with you so you don't feel like you have to hold it all by yourself. And so take advantage of that. If there's any other questions, things you want to hear from me, from Mary Kay, send me a message, let us know. Otherwise, I will be back next Sunday.